All right, welcome to the Six Ps podcast, a very special episode today. We're looking at high ground and we're joined by a very, very special guest, Mr. Tony Hip. How are you, Mr. Hip?
Very good, thank you, Jim. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, look, we've been trying to organise this for a while now. Obviously, clashing schedules and agents. There's been there's been a bit of tension there, but we've managed to come together now, and it's very good timing given we are approaching a very important assessment task next week.
Yes, we are.
So thank you to everyone for sending their questions in. That was very much appreciated. We've got a few to get. Before I do, Tony Hip, can you tell us what's one aspect of high ground that resonates with you?
I think the aspect of high ground that resonates with me is how much it is a film that is explicitly concerned with different kinds of morality and how those different layers of morality are unlocked the more that you watch it and the more that you study and think about it. I think the first time you watch this film, it does seem to be relatively surface level, but the more that you continue to explore and engage with it, the more layers you can peel back and understand the...
Yeah, love that answer. That's really good. Yeah, it's really interesting how when you do study a film, we've taught this before, so we're teaching it again, but you do find more and more things that you pick up that you go, oh, I did not even see that, didn't even notice it. Then all of a sudden it becomes a big focus that you end up talking about a lot, eh?
Yeah.
Our first question is actually about essay writing. So, it doesn't match my arguments. Being that question. I'm happy to take this one.
Okay.
The way I go about it is, and again, sometimes the quotation can come from a character who's just nowhere near your thoughts in terms of your example. So, I often say if you can't find a way to shoehorn it in there, it actually is okay to pop it into your introduction, which can be a bit controversial, but I think it's much better to acknowledge the quote, and the intro is a good way to do it if it doesn't work in your argument. So that's what I always go with. But again, ideally, we don't want quotations in our introduction. That's maybe one way that I'd go, yeah.
It's a tricky one. The quote is there often as a way for students to unlock how to interpret the prompt that they've been given. There's an example from the 2023 exam, I believe it is, where the quote is, Travis has no sense of duty, no sense of loyalty. And then the instruction is, high ground presents different understandings of loyalty. Discuss. And so that opening quote about Travis is there to help you unlock, okay, what does this prompt actually mean when they're talking about different understandings of loyalty? Oh, great, the way that Travis acts. So the quotes are there to help you, and it's as you say, it's very safe to use them in your essay at some point. And if you can't make it work in your body paragraphs, the introduction's a good place to put it.
It's also, if you do the other question, it's a free quote as well.
That's true.
So we like that as well, even if it's not your question. Next question, I think I actually didn't pop names down, but I think this comes from Ollie. I'm pretty sure this comes from Ollie. He asks us, what does it mean to lean into another theme that complements a theme being introduced in the prompt, and how could I structure that? What are your thoughts, Tony?
Well, I suppose this is a good question. It's one that implies the amount of preparation that's an exam task. When we think about all the different themes that the film contains, there are lots of, let's say, Venn diagrams, two circles with overlapping zones of themes. So, for example, if you get a prompt that is about truth, you might be leaning into something to do with the colonial version of truth versus version of truth. And then you've got two other themes that you can connect there. And then you might think of truth as being equivalent to justice, or truth as being equivalent to morality. It's thinking about how those different Venn diagrams of themes within the film can overlap and logically connect.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I love the idea about Venn diagrams. You mentioned it before, this idea that it can seem a very surface level film. And one of the reasons that happens, I think, or we get that idea, is because so many themes overlap. And I definitely agree. I mean, that this is a great way to prepare for an assessment task as well, because those themes or ideas that you've built up and revised, they're almost your safety net in terms of, I don't know what to write about, I don't have any other ideas. Well, no, you've got those other themes, workshop a way to get them in. I do like the phrasing lean into another theme as well. It's a really cool verb, lean. But again, if there is a topic on truth, there are so many other ideas that you can sort of encapsulate with that, and your topic sentences are the perfect way to do that.
Yeah, so true.
Next question, similar actually, I think, in terms of the advice that we can give here, but what happens if I get essay topics with words I haven't revised over? For example, there was a sample question on victimisation, and I couldn't think of any ideas about this. On victimisation, and I couldn't think of any ideas about this.
Well, there are two immediate things that a student can do in this situation. Number one, look at the other prompt.
Tick.
Yep. Number two, bring a dictionary in.
Yeah.
You can bring a dictionary into your English SACs, and you can bring a dictionary into the English examination. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Yeah, same thing. And students will often say, what's the point in having a dictionary? It's not a thesaurus. But the definition will provide you with some words anyway, some words that have similar ideas or meanings that you can then use. And again, if the word was victimisation, well, there's connotations to words like blame that you can then look at, and maybe that might formulate some ideas around that. And just if you're really stuck, then work backwards. So think about your examples, think about your characters. Okay, who are victims, who are not, and why? See if you can group them together and work out, okay, so you might have gender, or you might have culture that you're able to group characters to go around with. I do think you'd probably look at the other topic. That would be my sort of thinking, and hopefully that gives you a bit more of an edge. But working backwards with your evidence first, and then looking at, okay, how can I group these together, would be my way to go about it.
I agree. And another thing is that it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but you can also think of the antonyms of the words that you don't necessarily prompt on victimization. Well, the opposite of that is thinking about who are the perpetrators. And then you've got plenty in this text of evidence to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point too. I love that idea. And that goes for any topic. Antonyms, great piece of advice. We've got a bit of a maths question now. How many quotations should I have in each paragraph? I assume this means main body paragraph. Do you have a rule, Tony?
I do not have a rule. I find this question, it comes to me very often. I find it a little bit funny because I know that students, they want me to say 7 or 8 or 3, ideally. The answer is the amount of quotes that you need in each paragraph are the amount of quotes that you need to make your argument compelling and well justified. I say to students sometimes a minimum of 3, but if they are nicely integrated 1 to 2 word quotes, you can. But if they are nicely integrated 1 to 2 word quotes, you can have up to 8, 9, 10 in a paragraph that flows well.
Yeah. You're right. There's no one counting the amount of quotes. You do notice when they're not there, obviously, as well. And that would be the big piece of advice I'd give. I'd sort of be or an example without having any quotations. I think you're right. If you've got sort of 2 for each example, that works pretty well. Love that idea about the 1 or 2 quotes work really, really well. You are trying to show off your text knowledge to the examiner, which is why we say, quotes are really, really good. Obviously, here we're balancing it out as well with our film techniques as well, and our structural features of the film. So any pieces of evidence that we can include works really well. But yeah, there's no hard and fast rules. It's English, it's not maths, we're not counting. And again, the opposite of that is you don't want to bombard the examiner with quotes, because that might lead you with more summarising than analysing. So sort of the main thing. So
that's true. And you make a great point about, for a text like High Ground, this is also a text where you want to show off your understanding of the film techniques and how the director has produced meaning beyond dialogue. This movie is interesting because in the first 10-15 minutes of the film, there's maybe 10 words of dialogue. So there's actually not that many quotes, but lots of pieces of evidence of how the opening scenes are filmed and how they get across a particular meaning or message, which is going to be worth more to you if you're writing about, for example, the opening massacre scene. You want to be talking about the camera angles and the way that the camera looks down Travis's scope and the sound design and the way that different characters behave and move in that scene, rather than the...
No, 100%. And obviously... we're coming into an exam as well where there's 20 texts and the examiner's going to be marking on 12 different texts. 2 of those are films, but what makes the film unique is those visual elements. So, yeah, good point. All right, I'm curious about this question because... we've done some homework and I'm wondering whether we might have some of the same answers here, Mr. Hip. What are 3 quotes you think are worth memorising and work well for all essay topics?
Oh, goodness me. Okay.
What did you come up with? We'll see if we've got some similarities here. What did you come up with? We'll see if we've got some similarities here.
I've got 3.5 answers. So
Okay.
The first one I have is where Moran tells Travis, "You know what civilization is, son? It's bad men doing bad things." I think that works in almost any essay about this film. The second one that I have is when Travis is instructing Gutjuk in use a rifle, and he says, "When you control the high ground, you control everything." That is, I think, a fantastically useful quote, again, for almost any prompt for this film. And the third one I find to be a little bit more niche, but nevertheless still very, very useful for a variety of prompts. At the end of the film, in the kind of standoff scene when Eddie is pointing his gun at Travis, Eddie says to Travis, "You care more about Gutjuk than you do about yourself. God knows why." And I find that quite interesting because there's almost a double meaning there. Travis is trying to absolve himself of his past sins. And Eddie says, I feel like there's a really nice sneaky connection to morality and atonement with that quote there, and it works quite well. My additional bonus answer is pretty much anything that DARPA says. His lines are always useful.
I didn't really look at DARPA a whole lot the first time I taught this, but since teaching this now, there's so much to... I love the scene with him and Beirut before they go to the negotiation, because DARPA tells him, you need to stay here and protect the land. And then Beirut is quite deceptive. Like, he goes against DARPA. Beirut does. And then when the others say, DARPA says no. We need to protect ourselves. We have a bit of overlap. I had the how civilizations are built and son. He loves calling other people son.
Yes, he loves establishing himself as the leader.
Absolutely. And extending on that quote, whatever thought that you could change, I really love that, and it works well with those film techniques. It's one of the few scenes that are indoors. You've got the high camera angle. You've got Travis who's chained up. You can link that to the crocodile that he ends at the start of the film. There's lots that you can work around with that. Quote is another Moran quote, which is, "It's the responsibility of those who create history to record it." And I think that works really well across a whole lot of themes and ideas. And my third one is, I've just lost it. And yes, of course. It's, "I don't need to tell you what happens if this Beirut gets a voice." I don't need to tell you what happens if this Beirut gets a voice. I've gone through Moran quotes. I must really want to analyse him. And the reason I say that is because I think it speaks to a more contemporary audience. And when we think about this idea of a voice, we're obviously thinking about the current political landscape, or sort of what happened a few years ago. But here at silence and how silence works alongside violence and hypocrisy. I'll add a bonus one in. And it comes from John Braddock, and it's his Bible quote from Isaiah, where he talks about, and now I have forgotten the actual quote. It's about field after field. I will get it. I'll edit this out. Okay, I found the quote. It is John Braddock. He says, "What sorrow for you who buy house after house and field after field until everyone is evicted and you live alone in the land." So that was from Isaiah. He reads that on the mission to the First Nations people, including Gutjuk is in that scene, and Claire is in that scene. There's some nice visuals there as well with the beams behind them that look almost like prison bars. It's incongruous with the scenery as well, with all the trees. This incomplete church. I think that works really well in terms of hypocrisy, though, and corruption. And this idea about Braddock too, he is in a position of power, but again, he remains silent. He does later on when Moran suggests that Travis and Gutjuk are going to go out, and Moran says to him, says to Claire, "It's not like you have a choice." Complicit in the violence.
And it does link as well to the initial massacre scene when Braddock very deliberately puts his Bible away in the bag on his horse before all of the shooting begins, as if to say, "I don't want God to see what's about to happen here."
Love that.
And the Isaiah quote is for this idea of the colonial effort and the colonial destruction of Indigenous custodianship of where this film is set. So I think it's a very, very useful quote.
Next question. got a few more. What are some unique examples you have from the text? Has any student responses or interpretations of the film surprised you or even changed the way you see it?
The answer for this text and for any text is always yes, absolutely. The brain power of 20 students in a room is always better than one teacher. So
Absolutely.
Here's a few things that I've found from students in their writing so far. In the fantastic scene in this film where Moran's crew and DARPA's crew sit down together for a meeting. It's a very subtle thing, but Moran is seated in a chair during this scene. He is he is separated physically from the land in this scene, other characters, and that really typifies his view of himself as the crown representative. He wants to occupy the space, but he remains separate from it. His costume in that particular scene is also very, very useful for analysis. His pure white suit and his pith helmet with the crown logo, indicative of his character. That's the first one, him seated in that particular scene. It's very subtle, but very useful. The second one is another Moran scene when Travis is chained, as we were talking about indoors, when he's chained to a bed after he's been shot. Moran is standing in the doorway saying that civilization is bad men doing bad things. And the light around Moran, possible to see, he's almost anonymous in that scene visually. And he comes to represent not just the man Moran, he comes to represent the entire sort of colonial effort through that anonymity because of the way the light surrounds him. The last one that I have here is at the very end of the film, flimsy, rickety church is burned down. That church burning down, that acts almost as a symbolic moment of freedom for Claire. And Claire is someone who has been controlled by Moran. You know, he says to her earlier, it's not actually up to you, is it? So she can't really do anything in this movie until immediately after that happens, she shoots Eddie. She kills Eddie dead. I think that's a really interesting moment of her being unshackled and freed from the restrictions that have chained her up until this point.
Love that. Yeah. Again, three great things that I haven't thought about. I love the chair. With Moran, I do.
And freed from the restrictions that have chained her up until this point.
Love that. Yeah. Again, three great things that I haven't thought about. I love the chair. With Moran, I do also like in that scene, Gutchuk when he says, you see that shiny thing on his head? It makes him think he's boss.
Yeah.
A couple of things I picked up from students. Eddie's watch. So Eddie's watch face is upside down. Which is a wartime thing that you do during war. So this idea that that's his mentality is all around war. It links in with the quote when Claire says to Gutchuk, and it's their war, not his mindset tracks throughout the frontier wars. I do like Moran's voiceover when he sort of talks about the wild mob's actions, and he refers to them as miles. Miles are plants, and I think there's something really interesting about that use of subhuman primitive noun to describe First Nations people, and again he's dictating the narrative.
Yeah, that's MYALLS.
Sick, yeah, that's right. Bit of botany in the film as well, and then do some research on some of these. The Brolgas, we see two Brolgas flying together. They mate for life, and they're shown when Gauri and Gutchuk are together. So there's this idea that, again, that close connection to the land works really well with them. But if you freeze frame any single shot from this film, you will pick something up. And even I didn't pick up until maybe the fourth time with Claire with the shooting that she's wearing pants. I just didn't even notice that, which I should have, given I've watched Rear Window about 100 million times, and students always talk about Lisa's pants at the end. But Freeze seems to be always shot with rocks behind him. There's lots that you can sort of pick up there.
Yeah, because he's solid. Whenever Eddie is in frame, the landscape seems to be trying to push him out of it. When he's eating his lunch, there's flies
everywhere.
He's really annoyed about them. And whenever he's in the mission camp, the wind is always blowing quite strongly, trying to push him out. Eddie's a very fascinating character. And as you mentioned, the birds. This film features maybe 20, 30 shots of birds intercut between the scenes. And those birds, again, they do also act as as like the eyes of God watching all of these characters do these terrible things. They are the constant reminder of the morals, as like the eyes of God watching all of these characters do these terrible things. They are the constant reminder of the morality lesson that is at the heart of this film, I think.
And, you know, that's how DARPA finds out. It's through the birds. And he talks about his law and Father Sky and makes his film is a visual element as well.
Question 7.
Yes.
Can I mention the audience in my analysis? What do you think?
Of course you can. Of course you can. I think it works with other texts better. So a text like Oedipus, I think it works really well because we're dealing with two different audiences. Contemporary audience and obviously the classical Greek audience as well. I feel like there are ideas in this text that are aimed at a contemporary audience. Obviously the aim of this film is to provide a First Nations lens to the frontier wars and to, I guess, prompt some reflection within the audience. I think you can. I always am mindful though when you do this, sometimes it can sound very similar to argument analysis, and you sort of want to be able to show the examiner as well that there's a difference between the two of them. So I think it can be risky, but I think you can.
Yeah, I agree. This with caution. I think you can absolutely assert what you believe the film or the director's message or intentionality is through the evidence that you use in your paragraphs. The audience question is interesting because it really becomes who is the audience, and that's a little bit difficult to ascertain for a film that was released in 2019. As you say, it is presenting a First Nations perspective, and that allows you to call this perhaps a revisionist Western in your introduction. That's a very useful phrase. Or some students prefer a neo-Western.
Yeah.
We would probably advise against meat pie Western. It's not quite formal enough.
It is high in protein, though.
It is high in protein, absolutely.
Oh, potentially.
And as you say, there are some texts that are more suitable for an audience to be mentioned, like the ancient Greeks. We're talking about an ancient Athenian, specifically male audience. There's a bit more, I suppose, juice there to work with. But for this particular text, the directorial or the film's intent and message is I think, safer overall than mentioning an audience. But you can do it with caution.
This brings us to our last question, unless, of course, you must have some more. What is the meaning of the main quote of the film? If you have the high ground, you control everything, in terms of using it in an essay. I'll start. I'll start. This is a very obvious quote that a lot of students do use, and sometimes they do leave it hanging. High ground obviously has two meanings. You've got the literal high ground and you've got the moral high ground. Travis has the physical high ground a lot in this film, and we see it through the film techniques, through the lens, through the crosshairs of the rifle. But this idea that Travis talks about is a westernized version of control, when in fact he has no control. In both scenes, in both massacres, he has the physical high ground, but he can't control the situation, and it leads to more bloodshed. So for me, I look at this quote, particularly in terms of Travis, and this westernised version that Johnson sort of critiques and challenges, really. Is there anything you sort of pick up with this?
No, I agree. I think it's also crucial to know that whenever the colonial affairs, it's never from characters who are on ground higher than them. They're always caught unawares by people sneaking up on them in long grass, for example, actually physically below them. Yeah. So the idea of the high ground is something that doesn't really actually tactically quite work in a physical sense for these characters. Of course, it also means the moral high ground, and Travis and Gutchuk, in the scene where Travis teaches Gutchuk how to shoot, both those characters are very much equivalent in that moment. And I think that's a really key scene. They later share some food afterwards. Gutchuk teaches him about particular bush plums, I think they are. And Travis offers him some of his canned meat, which Gutchuk says no thank you to. Mentioning of Gutchuk and Travis at all times is very important. Who is physically higher than the other one? It's interesting to watch what happens with the characters' behaviour when they are together. Travis, you'll often find seated below Gutchuk, and certain things happen in those moments which can be interesting for analysis. Very subtle, but very useful. Can be interesting for analysis. Very subtle, but very useful.
Yeah, the relationship tracks throughout. Like it starts with obviously Travis saving him, or I use that word saving, but pulling him out of the water and holding him and protecting him. But obviously he never reveals him and protecting him. But obviously he never reveals to Gutchuk what actually happened there. Hands him to Claire, flees, leaves, returns, and they're both quite duplicitous towards one another. I think Travis refers to him as bait, when using him as bait, and then Gutchuk says it works so well because it links to the opening scene with Bayora teaching Gutchuk about that and that transfer of knowledge and that generational knowledge that's sort of passed down. So great relationship to look at, and leads me to another point, which something that I like doing is I always try and see if I can get Gutchuk and Travis. Something that I like doing is I always try and see if I can get Gutchuk and Travis in my last main body paragraph as a way to close my essay. Now, that doesn't work for every topic, but I find for a lot of topics that works really well as a way to close my analysis and resolve my topic. And often it's in a more, and I use this very vague term, a more positive.
Yeah, Travis and Gutchuk are characters that inhabit kind of both worlds of the characters in this film. They both inhabit, I suppose, the Indigenous perspective and the colonial perspective and the tension that exists in between them. So I agree. Having them both in one paragraph at the end of an essay is very, very effective.
That's our last question. So is there anything that you'd like to add? Any nuggets of gold?
Well, I'd like to have one final brief discussion. I've got 5 mini questions.
Ooh.
They are best prop in the film, best moment of mise en scène, best example of blocking, so where the character's positioned in the frame, most evil character and most righteous character.
Okay.
So what do you think? And most righteous character.
Okay.
So what do you think? What's the best prop?
I'll go the rock that Gulri uses to fend off her abusers. She, and the reason I say that is because it is juxtaposed against Gutchuk's gun and rifles in the film as weapons, but reliance on land from the prop that I'd go with. Works with gender, works with power, works with violence, it just works with a few things. What about you?
That's a great answer. I'm going to take a sort of coward's route. I've got 2 answers. One is Travis's rifle. Travis's rifle is specifically German. It's not an Australian rifle. It's not a British rifle. It's German. And in that sense, it doesn't necessarily hold the same loyalty. Rifle. It's not a British rifle. It's German. And in that sense, it doesn't necessarily hold the same loyalties that other rifles in the film have. You'll notice that Travis's rifle is used by lots of different characters, specifically Gutchuk. And the other one is Moran's camera. When Moran is taking a photo of Travis towards the beginning of the film after Travis has killed a crocodile, the view through the film after Travis has killed a crocodile, the view through the camera is upside down to, I suppose, symbolically hint at the way that this situation is not as it should be. This is not the way that things should be. So they'd be my 2 answers. I love The Rock, though. The Rock is a fantastic example, too.
Yeah.
Number 2, best example of of things inside the frame.
I was trying to think of something a bit more unique, but I'll go the negotiation scene, the long shot with Travis standing between the 2 groups. And I think, from memory, Walter's hanging out in the background somewhere too. I'll go with that one because and the separation between the 2 of them with Travis in the middle. He's literally caught in the middle between these 2. I also like the costuming, which we touched on before too, but even the framing of it is the First Nations, the Yolngu people are quite closely tight-knit together, whereas Moran and Braddock and Claire aren't. So I'll go with that as a shot that I really like. What about you?
Yeah, I had that one for my example of best blocking, and I predict that you would have that for best blocking as well. I think best mise en scène is the way that the mission appears. Specifically the church being made of sticks. It's literally hollow, flimsy institution, and so I feel like that is a really good example of the moral hollowness and the moral flimsiness of the colonial effort.
Okay.
I feel like we've answered best mise en scène and best blocking.
I missed the blocking. I do apologise. Now I might try and think of a different mise en scène now. There is something about the campfire scene. I think with the fire flickering, there's something about that I really like. That links in lighting as well, and just the darkness that surrounds them.
It's the offering of enlightenment, literally and metaphorically in those moments. Yeah. Darpa is pleading with both Bayawara and later on Gutjuk.
Yeah, absolutely. No, spot on. Yeah.
And finally, most evil character.
Most evil character.
This is a tough question. This is not necessarily something that could be useful in an essay, but let's call them most morally bankrupt character.
Oh, Braddock, John.
Absolutely. I had the same answer.
Yeah, 100%. Like, he has the power to act, and he remains silent throughout. And all he has really to comfort himself are Bible verses which don't relate to anything really. Like, the two that he uses, the Isaiah quote. Either.
Either. Yep.
Just doesn't work. And then when he's cradling a dead person, dies and he's holding someone who's dead, I just think that for me,
Yeah, absolute hypocrite. Yeah, terrible person. Yeah. Most righteous character, most morally righteous character.
I'll go with Gory.
Good answer. I'm going to go with DARPA.
Yeah, I do like DARPA. I'll go Gory just because I think what's important to note about Gory is she suffered for all her life. Boss man thought he owned me. He gave me to his men. Like, this is long-term suffering, and she sort of has some sort of agency. And we can raise this idea of, well, violence can never be justified. But I think given her story, you definitely can. And given what we see with her being abused, I think you definitely can. So
I agree.
Yeah. But no, DARPA is a cool example as well.
Yeah. He's the one who demonstrates the ability to extricate himself from the cycle of violence in the film. And he does so at great personal cost, like as you say earlier, to essentially give up the life of his son Baywara. But he does so in order to stop the cycle of violence that occurs in the film. So that's why I've chosen Baywara. DARPA, pardon me, but Golwari is also an excellent answer.
I love those quick fire questions. Great stuff. All right, we're done. It's a wrap. Back again at some stage. Maybe before the exam we can get you on.
Yeah, love to.